Reality is not random, it's structured, and it's running on code that you were never given. Just think about where you actually are right now. You're most likely someone who has done the work. You've gone through coaching, personal development books. You've done the inner work. You've essentially invested in understanding yourself at a level that most people never reach. You likely understand your patterns, your triggers, and you know where it all comes from. And you're still watching the same patterns repeat, the same relationship dynamic, the same financial ceiling, the same emotional cycle, showing up in different rooms, wearing different names, running the same exact sequence. And the most frustrating part is not the actual pattern itself. It's that you can see it because you've done the work to be able to see it very clearly. You've named it, processed it, understood it, and it's still running. You see, this isn't a problem of willpower or discipline. This is a problem that has to do with your code that is running internally. You've been trying to change the experience without touching the system that's generating it. And this is what's been running underneath everything. So it starts with your identity. Then it goes into your emotion. Then it goes into your perception, how you perceive everything, which then leads into your behavior. What you're perceiving allows you to take a specific action based off of how you're seeing things, the lens, right? And the behavior is what follows. And then based off this, you get a certain outcome, which then ultimately goes back and reinforces your identity. This is the hidden loop, okay? And this is important because most people don't even know that they're running this loop. And when they're running this loop, they're getting certain outcomes, okay, that they don't want. But once they are aware of this, they can then change these components in terms of what lens they see reality from and through, kind of emotions that they accept and act on, okay? And then their main root system here, their identity. So your identity is the main root system. Think about this like a desktop or laptop computer. You have Microsoft Windows 11 or 10 or whatever, Microsoft Windows, which is the main operating system. This is your identity. And so everything else gets filtered through this. The emotions that you feel, and then the perceptions that you have based off of how these emotions are coming into play. If you think that something's a huge big deal and you have fear about something, then you're perceiving it as a threat, which then means that you're not going to take any action on it, right? Even though the action that you take may feel scary, but it may be getting you and pointing you directly to your outcome that you actually want, okay? Now, here's what every personal development framework teacher or guru out there teaches. So I'm gonna put a line here. So two sides. This is the where you've been working. This is where reality operates. This is all here, the surface level, okay? On the left-hand side. So you have your mindset, you have habits, behavior, you have goals, and you have motivation. These are all important, but they're behavior activities, they're actions, and they're very surface level. Now, when it comes to where reality operates, this starts with identity, emotional frequency, interpretation. This is how you are interpreting specific events, experiences, okay? Which then are giving you a specific emotion, right? This is a perception. The perception, the lens that you are seeing something through. And then for this one, finally, we have resonance. So reality operates here, and nobody teaches you this because most frameworks were built to address the things that you can see, the behavior, the output, the result. But underneath every behavior is a perception, and underneath every perception is an emotion, and underneath every emotion there's an identity. An identity is the master instruction set that the entire loop runs from. You see, you don't change the loop by modifying the behavior. You change the loop by modifying the identity at the center of it. This whole loop here doesn't change until you change your identity. Because remember, this is the main root system. And when you change this, everything else follows. You can't try to change your behavior. You can't try to change your perceptions. You need to start here and reinforce and get very specific and clear about who you are as an identity. And I understand that nobody gave you this instruction. That's not your fault, but it is your access point. And I've worked with a lot of different entrepreneurs, business owners, founders who are genuinely self-aware. These are people who have gone through coaching, therapy, they've done the inner work, they've read a bunch of different personal development books, and they could understand themselves better than most people ever will. And yet they were still stuck, not because they hadn't done enough work. It's because they had been working at the level of experience. And reality doesn't respond to experience level changes. It responds to identity level changes, to emotional frequency, to the interpretation pattern that's running under everything that you see. When I map this across my own life and across many others that I've worked with, I found that there are 4 invisible laws governing how reality actually works. Not theories, but laws. Consistent, structural, operating underneath every outcome that you've produced. And there are 6 precise steps to gain full access to them. I call it the A.C.C.E.S.S method. It's not another self-help framework. It's the operating manual that you were never given. Okay, so here's exactly what we're covering today. So the 4 invisible laws, these are the structural rules that reality actually runs on. The law of identity, law of emotion, the law of interpretation, and the law of residence. And then we're going to go over the hidden loop. This is the exact sequence that's running underneath every single pattern. Now, we went through it up here, so it's very straightforward. Identity generates emotion. Your emotion filters perception. Perception drives behavior. And then behavior produces outcomes. And then your outcomes reinforce your identity. Powerful. And then we're going to go through the A.C.C.E.S.S method. So this is an acronym. This is 6 steps. And this is the precise sequence for moving from a hidden loop that you can't see to a structured system that you direct. Here's what I need you to understand before we get into this. You were never missing the power to shape your reality. You were missing the guide, and today you get it. To make this real, I want to walk you through an archetype that I call the aware observer. Now, the aware observer is someone who, by every external measure, is someone who has done the work. They're self-aware, emotionally intelligent. They've invested in their own personal transformation, coaching, therapy, personal development books, content, inner work. And so they understand themselves better than most people ever will. And yet they keep seeing the same patterns repeating. And they keep repeating, not in an obvious or dramatic way, in a subtle, almost invisible way that makes it even harder to address, because each new situation looks different on the surface. Different person, different context, different set of circumstances, but the underlying structure of what they experience is identical. The same dynamic in relationships, the same ceilings in business, reached and retreated from at the same point every time. The same internal experience of being close and then somehow not. And this is what makes the aware observer so difficult to get out of, because they're not unconscious. They can see the pattern, they can name the emotion, they can trace the wound, they can explain the trigger, they can articulate the belief. But even with all of that awareness, something underneath keeps producing the same outcome. And all of this is because the aware observer is usually working on life at a symptom level, adjusting behavior, processing emotions, setting new goals, naming patterns. But underneath all of it, a hidden loop is still running that they were never shown how to identify, interrupt, and then re-architect. You see, the aware observer is not trapped by their circumstances. They are trapped by a loop they can finally sense, but still cannot fully see. And this is the difference between awareness and architecture. With awareness, it lets you see that something is repeating. And architecture shows you what is generating the repetition. So with this archetype, I always start with one question. When you imagine the version of your life you keep moving forward, who are you in that life? Not what you do or what you have, but who are you? Because the aware observer can often tell you what they want. They can tell you the relationship they want, the business they want, the monthly income they want to have, the freedom that they want, the passive income, all of that. But what they don't do is very precisely define the identity that can actually hold it. And so because of that, we start with the identity that is currently generating the loop. Because until that changes, every surface level adjustment is just rearranging the same structure. The loop doesn't change until the identity at the center of it does. Okay, so let's walk through what reality is. We'll walk through the structure, the 4 laws, and the hidden loop. So let me go ahead and erase the board here. Okay, so let me give you the structural definition, because once you have this, the pattern that you've been living inside becomes completely visible. So reality equals pattern plus laws plus loops plus identity construct. Because here's the thing, reality is not random, it's not chaotic, it's not luck, it's not something that happens to you from the outside. Think about it this way. Imagine being dropped into a video game with no map, no rule book, no explanation of how the controls work. You can move, you can act, you can try things, but without understanding the rules of the game, the laws that govern what produces what, you'll keep colliding with the same walls and call it bad luck. That's most people's relationship with reality. Here's the game. Here's the 4 laws that run it. Law number 1, the law of identity. You see, with the law of identity, you don't experience reality directly. You experience your identity's version of reality. This is your self-concept, who you believe yourself to be, who you believe you are, what you believe you deserve, what you believe is available to people like you. And all of that operates as a filter. It determines which opportunities that you recognize, which doors that you register as open, which timelines feel available versus impossible. You don't manifest or create your reality from desire. You manifest and create your reality through your identity. Just think about 2 different people that go to a networking event. It's the same opportunity for both people. And one person sees an opportunity to leverage and build a network. And the other person sees themselves as someone who's not very good at building rapport, as kind of being quiet and to himself and isn't really extroverted. And so both of these people get completely different experiences because the identity that is determining what gets filtered is completely different. Identity is the main root source. Law number 2, the law of emotion. You see, emotion is not a reaction to reality. It's a broadcast signal. Your emotional state, essentially the baseline frequency that you're operating from, not your peak moments, but your everyday undercurrent. Now, one of the things that I always like to mention when it comes to emotional baseline, is having a mental, positive attitude. And the emotional state here essentially is where you want it to be like this. And this is why I mentioned having the positive mental attitude, because when things happen to you, instead of it being like this, where most people are, okay, you want to be like this, super small. Now, this is important here. It's about understanding what is your base frequency, okay? And not where right here you're very even keel. Maybe you're just kind of like letting things go. You're making peace with things. And so you're kind of like right here in the middle, baseline. But you want to be as close to the middle as possible. That's why having these small little jumps where you don't get too high, you don't get too low, that's where you really want to be here. Because your main baseline frequency, your emotional state, this is what selects your timelines, attracts experiences, shapes interpretations, and determines which actions feel available or impossible. Now, a big thing here in terms of your emotional state as well that I want to emphasize is that your frequency, this is a signal that is going out there into the universe, okay? Then it's reflecting back. And so all the things that you want to accomplish in your life, you have to look at the emotional state that I have and that I'm running. Is that consistent with the version of me that has the outcome, the things that I want in my new reality, right? Because we're often looking to get to the next level and reach a new version of ourselves. But we have to understand what is that frequency base level that new version of you has that is able to hold a new reality. Emotion is the frequency that reality responds to. Now, this is super important here because most people treat emotion as something that follows events. You know, something happens and then you feel a certain way. Now, that's just a loop that's happening automatically. But what really is going on here is that the loop is running in both directions. The emotional state that you're operating from is continually shaping which events get generated before they arrive. So let's look at this from two different patterns. So the loops are going in both directions, okay? So something happens and you get an emotion. This is normally how people really look at emotions, okay? So you have an event, you, let's say, get hit and a fender bender, somebody rear ends your car, okay? Then that happens, the event, and then you get an emotion, okay? And when this happens here, this is a negative emotion typically, okay? Something happens, you get rear-ended, it's a negative experience, negative emotion versus something happening to you at your baseline frequency here, okay, very calm. And then you shape it in terms of event, but then now it's just like positive because you're seeing it from the lens of it is what it is. I'm alive. I can fix my car. Okay. So you're seeing it from a different lens. Okay. And it's because your baseline frequency here is very even keel so that you don't get too high. You don't get too low. Here, you're like this. And then you're right here. You got rear-ended. And so now you're freaking out versus here, you're just like, dang, it's unfortunate. That sucks. But it is what it is. What can I do about it, right? Because Worrying about stuff and things that you have zero control over does nothing for you. So here, you're more of, I'm grateful that I'm alive. My car can get fixed. Okay, so very, very important. This is with making sure that you have a very baseline emotional state, okay? This is where you want to be. And because ultimately here, this is a mirror, you put a mirror right here, okay? If your natural baseline is all over the place, sporadic, then you're going to naturally attract the same types of events back into your experience because you're reinforcing everything through your identity, okay? And so these types of events are more likely to happen to you again because it's what you are reflecting out and it's what's in the mirror reflecting back to you. Versus here, if your emotional baseline is very up and down, up and down, up and down, things can still happen to you, but they're not going to be as often because your frequency is of somebody who doesn't have the chaos of someone who is all over the place here with this baseline, okay? So that the mirror here shows very even keel. So there's nothing for the frequency to bring back these types of experience and events because they're very even keel. And in the time, in a situation that it actually does happen, where they get into a fender bender, their emotional baseline is very even keel anyway. So it just kind of counters everything because of that emotional baseline state. Law number 3, the law of interpretation. Here's the thing. Events are neutral. The meaning they carry, the identity conclusions they install, the emotional state they generate, the next behavior they trigger is not in the event. It's in the interpretation that you assign to it. Interpretation is more powerful than the event itself. The same event, a business setback, a relationship ending, a public failure, can generate two completely different reality trajectories. Not because the event was different. It's because the interpretation assigned to it was different. You have one interpretation that confirms that you're not capable. So then your identity contracts, your emotions drop, your behavior retreats, and then your outcome is your ceiling reinforced. In a different interpretation where you're using this and you're seeing this as data. This is the system that is showing me where the gap is. The identity holds, the emotions stabilize, behavior adapts, and the outcome is the ceiling is broken. You don't control every event that arrives in your reality. You control what every event means, and that control is the most consequential power available to you. Law number 4, the law of resonance. The fourth law is the one that makes the other 3 a system rather than a separate set of ideas. With resonance, this is the principle that your combined identity, emotional frequency, and interpretation pattern emits a signal, and reality mirrors that signal back. The people that appear in your life, the opportunities that surface, the patterns that repeat, the ceiling you keep arriving at. None of it's random. All of it is resonance, because you get what you match, not what you want, which is why desire alone never changes the outcome. So let's look at the full loop here. So we have the law of identity, which your identity is shaping what you emotionally broadcast, and your emotions filter what you perceive and what you interpret, and then your interpretations factor into your behavior, and then your behavior gives you the outcome and reinforces the identity that started the loop in the first place. Okay, so now I want to walk through the access framework. This is the reality access method. So let me go ahead and erase the board here and we'll walk through that. Okay, so the access framework. reality access method. So step 1, A, awareness. Here's the thing. You cannot change a system that you cannot see. Awareness is not self-reflection in the general sense. It's not about journaling how you feel or revisiting your childhood. It's a specific and diagnostic act, which is the deliberate observation of the pattern that is currently running. And so for this, you want to ask yourself 3 questions. What identity am I currently operating from? Number 2, what emotional frequency is my baseline? Not peak, default. Remember, when we have the baseline here of the emotion, and where most people are very high and sporadic, we want to be here. But first is about the awareness of understanding where we currently are. And then number 3, what unconscious interpretation am I assigning to the things that keep happening? Okay, very, very powerful. So what identity am I currently operating from? What emotional frequency is my baseline? Default baseline. What unconscious interpretation am I assigning to the things that keep happening over and over again, right? And these 3 codes, when answered honestly, reveal the code that's been running the loop. Here's the thing about awareness at this level. Most people have surface level self-awareness. They know what they feel. They can name their emotions. They understand their general tendencies, but they have never looked at the precise architecture underneath. What identity is in the driver's seat? What frequency is that identity broadcasting? What interpretation pattern is that frequency selecting for? You see, awareness is the access point because you can't edit the code that you haven't located. Step 2, change the identity. This is the master lever because identity is the instruction set that runs every other variable in the loop. And this step is also the most misunderstood because most people approach identity change as something that happens after the evidence arrives. It's something where people say, once I have the result, I'll feel like someone who deserves it. You see, that sequence is backwards. Identity first, evidence follows. Changing the identity doesn't mean creating affirmations. It doesn't mean pretending or acting as if. It's about making a precise, non-negotiable decision about who you are, grounded in real evidence of what you've already demonstrated, even in small form, and then running every subsequent perception, interpretation, and behavior through the filter of that decision. So the shift is from, I hope this is who I'm becoming, to this is who I am. And this is a really big contrast because it's not about, I hope to be after I see evidence. Okay? It's literally, I am. Okay? Whatever it is here that you have decided. Okay? Before the evidence. Okay? Evidence appears. Because here, you're just waiting to see evidence, physical manifestation, that then you'll see that and then be able to feel like a certain person, okay? However, I am X, Y, identity, and then you decide that internally, which then creates the physical evidence, okay? External. after, okay? This is an inside out game. You first start internally. This is who I am. You make that decision inside, okay? Your internal operating system, your main root system, okay? This is like Microsoft Windows, okay? Or like Apple iOS. This is the main operating system that runs everything, okay? So you need that first to be grounded, to be set up in a way where you know you are a certain way, and then things will manifest and happen for you in terms of the external reality based off of this identity. But first, it needs to start inside. Step 3, you want to calibrate emotion. Changing the identity gives the loop a new instruction set, and calibrating the emotion gives it the right frequency to broadcast. Because here's what most people miss. You can declare a new identity and still be broadcasting the old emotional frequency. The declaration is cognitive. The calibration is somatic. At the level of the nervous system, the body, the felt sense, the emotional baseline that you inhabit daily is the signal that reality responds to, not the emotional peaks, highs and lows, the baseline. Calibration is not forcing positivity. It's not manufacturing a feeling that you don't have. It is the deliberate, consistent practice of inhabiting the emotional frequency that belongs to the identity that you've declared. Calm for clarity, confidence for opportunity, certainty for abundance, until the baseline shifts. Think about it this way. A radio tower doesn't occasionally broadcast the right signal and then expect consistent reception. It maintains the frequency. The reception is consistent because the frequency is consistent. You are the tower. Calibrate the emotion, and the frequency you broadcast becomes consistent with the identity you've declared. Step 4, edit interpretation. This is where you take direct and active control of the most consequential variable in the loop. Editing interpretations is not reframing as a coping mechanism. It's not toxic positivity. It is the precise, deliberate act of choosing which meaning to assign to an event, because you understand that the meaning you assign determines which version of the loop gets reinforced. And reframing is extremely powerful, but you don't want to do it just for like, hey, I want to be positive and toxic positivity just to be and act as if all this stuff. You want to do reframing very precisely, okay? Because when you reframe things in terms of, let's say something happens to you and you get into a fender bender. I like using this example very precisely and clearly. You get into a fender bender and then you experience an emotion of, let's say, uneasiness, uncertainty, maybe fear, maybe doubt, maybe angry, okay? Maybe you're very angry that somebody hit you. However, when you see it from a lens of an interpretation of, I'm just grateful that I'm alive. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that my car, which can be fixed, is going to get taken care of. But me and myself, I was able to walk away from everything, okay, with all my hands, with my feet, with my fingers, okay? Essentially coming away from the situation, the event, all intact. And so for us, we're reframing this from a lens of empowerment, okay? From a challenge to opportunity. Because even when something is a challenge, it's an opportunity for you to learn, to get more experience, more knowledge. So there's always an opportunity hidden in here. And this is a very powerful and empowering reframe, okay? And then failure. Instead of it being like, hey, I did this, I tried it and I failed, I just gathered data. I found something that doesn't work. And then from resistance to a calibration signal. And then from delay to redirection. Notice how all of these here keep you stuck, okay? They essentially put a wall, okay? Here's a wall. And you here want to go over this wall, and so you jump over, okay? Or you completely remove this wall, okay? But your whole intent is to get to the other side, go through it, over top or under. And what allows you to have this wall removed, because really this is all internally, right? This is in your mind and in terms of your internal operating system that you're running. This wall here is all of these and everything that keeps you stuck, versus you hit this challenge, opportunity, jump over, failure, go under, it's data, resistance, go through it, it's nothing. It's like, it is what it is. It's telling me that I need to do something. I need to make a move. I need to change, delay, redirection, jump on top. So that's how you want to look at it. And oftentimes what happens with a challenge is that a threat is produced. So this contracts your identity and doesn't allow you to move. So it keeps the identity stuck because it's just seeing this wall here and it doesn't see any way to get over it, through it, or under it. And so for all of this, editing your interpretations, this is not something that requires you to make a decision. This is a common practice. You build the capacity over time by consistently, at the moment of the interpretation, pausing long enough to choose the meaning rather than default to the automatic one. So edit the interpretation and you take authorship over what every experience in your life means. Step 5. Shift the frequency. You see, identity, emotion, interpretation are the 3 internal variables, and frequency is what those 3 combine to produce. And it's what reality is continually reading and responding to. Shifting the frequency is the practice of deliberately tuning the signal, not as a single act, but as a continuous orientation. Here are the 5 frequency inputs. Breath. Use this to regulate nervous system. Now, I have used this in a bunch of other videos that I've done, but one of the things that I like to do myself, and I've taught many others and teach my students, is to make sure that when you are going through something and you want to stabilize your frequency, take 3 to 5 deep breaths, okay? Inhale for 3 to 5, and then exhale for 3 to 5. This is extremely powerful to be able to control and regulate your nervous system. Doing this 3 to 5 times, you'll immediately feel the difference, okay? Very, very powerful. So use the breath to regulate the nervous system. Your intention directs the focus of the broadcast. Your environment tunes the ambient frequency. Embodiment anchors identity in the physical. And then belief closes the gap between declared and felt. And this is super important here because frequency is not a metaphor. It's the combined signal produced by how you think, how you feel, how you carry yourself, and what you consistently direct your attention towards. and what you have come to believe is true and available. Every input here is a dial, and every dial that you turn in the direction of your identity and reality that you've declared is strengthening the broadcast. You see, most people wait for external circumstances to shift their frequency. A result arrives, and then they feel like the person who produces that result. But the sequence has to run in reverse. Shift the frequency, and reality reorganizes to match the signal. Step 6. Shape behavior. Everything before this step was internal restructuring. Shaping behavior is where the restructured internal system expresses itself in the world, and where the external reality begins to reorganize. And here's what makes this step different from every conventional behavior change advice you've ever received. The behavior does not create the identity. The identity generates the behavior, which means when the identity has genuinely shifted, the aligned behavior doesn't require discipline. It doesn't require forcing. It doesn't require willpower or self-monitoring. It's simply what you do, because it's what someone with that identity does. Shaping behavior at this stage is not about adding more to your routine. It's about identifying the specific actions that belong to the declared identity, the ones the future self version of you would take automatically, and beginning to take them now. Small, consistent, identity confirming. Every aligned action is a vote that tells the nervous system, this is who we are now. Okay, so let's recap all of this here. So start with awareness. We want to then change the identity. Okay, understanding that the identity is the root cause here, the root system, Microsoft Office. And then we want to calibrate the emotion, edit the interpretation, shift the frequency, and then shape the behavior. This is the A.C.C.E.S.S system. This is not a self-improvement method or technique. This is the operating manual for reality itself. Here's what I need you to understand. You were never missing the power to shape your reality. You were missing the guide, and now you have it.